Well, hey guys, we're going to start out on Johnson Street in Greenwood, Mississippi today. We're going to take a look at the Emmett Till story, maybe from a little bit different perspective. We're going to talk about the events of that week in August of 1955 and their impact on the family of Moses Wright, Emmett's uncle. And we're going to finish up at the site where Emmett was abducted. This is the point where I say if you like this kind of content, why don't you smash that like button? On August 20th, 1955, Maurice Wright traveled from the Wright home just outside Money, Mississippi, to the train station in Grenada to pick up his father, who was traveling with a couple of his cousins from Chicago. Everyone was excited about their cousin's visit to Mississippi. They were headed for Preacher Wright's home on Darkfear Road, some 3 miles from Money, Mississippi. Emmett, or Bobo as everyone called him, was 14 years old, and he was about 5'6" and 140 or so pounds. Some called Emmett chubby. By comparison, his cousin, young Simeon, was 12 years old, and he was only 5 feet tall and around 90 pounds. As soon as Bobo stepped out of the car, young Simeon noticed how much he had grown since the last time he saw him, and almost as quickly he noticed the silver ring on Bobo's finger. The boys were excited, but the family settled in, and on Sunday they drove to a store located just about right here to buy fireworks. Emmett set a couple fireworks off when he came back outside, so the boys rushed home. He didn't understand that you couldn't do that inside the little community of Money. Sunday night, he and young Simeon lie in bed together, with Bobo telling him stories about summers in Lincoln Park in Chicago. They dreamed of a day when Simeon and Bobo could play together in Lincoln Park. Monday, after Bobo begged Preacher Wright to let him go along to the cotton field too, the whole family loaded up and went to pick cotton. Bobo was given a 9-foot sack, but Monday evening he retired from cotton picking. The heat was just too much for him. But Bobo was quite the comedian, so he entertained the family that night. Tuesday, Bobo stayed home and was bored. That night, the boys rode around in their father's Ford, and they ate watermelon. Bobo seemed to be having lots of fun. He was particularly impressed with his cousin's ability to run the snakes out before they jumped in the swimming hole. On Wednesday, August the 24th, Bobo stayed home again when everybody went to pick cotton. Once again, he was bored, so when everybody got home, they ate a big supper and drove the 3 miles to Money to entertain Bobo. There were 4 stores in Money, and they all faced east. Maurice and Wheeler were riding up front with Simeon and Bobo and a neighbor's kid in the back seat when the boys pulled up to Bryant's grocery. It was almost sundown as the boys were standing out in front of Bryant's, talking smack and just generally having fun. Wheeler decided he wanted something to drink, and so he went in the store and Bobo followed him. Wheeler bought his drink and came back outside, but Bobo stayed in the store. Maurice sent Simeon in to be with Bobo, so he was alone in the store for less than a minute. Emmett, or Bobo, paid for his things and left. The boys were out front of the store talking again when Mrs. Bryant came out. As she was going to her car, Bobo whistled. Simeon described it as a loud wolf whistle, sort of a wee-wee. Nobody was sure why Bobo did it. They just knew that they were scared, and they jumped in the car and sped away. On the way home, Bobo pled with all his cousins to please not tell Moses, because he was having a great time in Mississippi and he didn't want to be sent home early. So they decided to all keep quiet. They went to bed not saying anything, and the next morning they went back to the cotton fields, almost forgetting the events that had happened. Later that evening, a neighbor girl said that she had heard what had happened at the store, and to expect trouble. The Bryants would not forget. Nothing out of the ordinary happened on Friday, so the boys generally forgot about the events of Wednesday evening. They were looking forward to their trip to Greenwood on Saturday night. On Saturday, when the boys went to Greenwood, Simeon rode with a neighbor, John Crawford, to see the movies. Maurice, Bobo, Wheeler, and Sunnyman, another neighbor, rode down to Johnson Street. Robert stayed at home to listen to Gunsmoke. The boys walked up and down Johnson Street, looking in the clubs and watching people dance. Then they went to the Blue Light Tavern on McLaurin. Then they went to the Four Fifths Plantation to a house party for some gambling and white lightning. They tasted some moonshine but found no girls, so they left for home. Simeon fell asleep during the ride, and the boys got home a little after midnight. They hadn't been in bed for 2 hours even when they were startled awake. Moses woke up to a voice coming from the front porch. He asked, "Who is it?" Someone replied, "This is Mr. Bryant. I want to talk to you about that boy." When Moses opened the door, he saw that there were 2 men. One of them was holding a flashlight in one hand and a gun in the other. There was a third man in the back that Moses believed to be a black man sent to identify the location of his home. The white guys entered the house through the room where Maurice and Wheeler were sleeping. As Moses woke Wheeler up, Milam told him that he was looking for the fat boy from Chicago. All of a sudden, Simeon heard loud talking in his bedroom. As he shielded his eyes from the glare of the flashlight, Milam told him to go back to sleep. Moses had to shake Bobo for a long time to get him to wake up. That's when Simeon realized that they had come to take Bobo away. About that time, Simeon's mom rushed into the room, pleading with the men not to take Bobo or to harm him. They told Bobo to hurry up and get dressed. Simeon was fully awake now, but lying perfectly still. Simeon says his dad did have 2 shotguns in the closet, but he never tried to get them. He believed that if his dad had made an attempt to try to get the guns, that none of the family would be alive today. Simeon remembers being stiff and frozen in bed, but trembling with fear. Bobo left the room without saying a word. Simeon and Wheeler both lay wide awake for hours, but never said a word. Maurice, Robert, and Curtis slept through the whole ordeal. Simeon remembers that every time he heard a car coming down the road, he waited to see if it was the men bringing Bobo back. All he could do was lie still and pray. Simeon's mom could not be consoled, so Moses took her to her brother's house in Sumner. She never came back to the home. Moses and that uncle drove around looking for the men in the truck. At sunup, Wheeler was sent to another uncle's house, but had to wait until Monday to be put on the train home for Chicago. When Moses came back from depositing Wheeler with the other uncle, he notified the sheriff, who sent a deputy out to take a statement. Around this time, Curtis called his mother in Chicago, and she told Bobo's mother and grandmother. Curtis stayed until evening, but at that point he went to an aunt's house in Greenwood. Moses was simply getting all the kids that were not his personal children out of the house for fear of their safety. Simeon says that August 28, 1955 was the longest day of his life. We're making our way to the spot where Bobo's body was pulled from the river. Simeon was sent to a neighbor's home for 3 days, but he still worked in the fields every day, wondering and praying for Bobo. Bryant and Milam were arrested on Monday, but Wednesday around noon, a deputy came to the field for Moses. Simeon says he watched his father leave quietly, and he knew they had found Bobo dead. Moses was taken to ID Bobo, which he did, then came back home. Simeon remembers the family still having meals, but no one ate much. His sister lost 10 pounds in 10 days. Moses sat on the porch in the swing with no one to talk to because Mom had left for Chicago. The Tallahatchie County Sheriff wanted to bury the body almost immediately. Simeon, who says he never knew Bobo's real name was Emmett until after all this happened, never saw Bobo's body, but he later saw pictures. The East Money Church of God in Christ was chosen as a suitable place for burial. The family left the cotton fields and prepared for the funeral and were standing around the grave when the LaFleur County Sheriff showed up and stopped everything. He told the undertaker to take the body back to Greenwood and prepare it to ship to Chicago. The Chicago mayor and the Illinois governor had intervened. Simeon's mom traveled with the body back to Chicago, and she never came back to Mississippi. The very next day, everybody went back to the fields to pick cotton. Simeon remembers that some of the people come in by the house calling what happened to Bobo a lynching, but Moses always called it a slaying. There is no doubt that the horrible events that occurred this week of August of 1955 impacted this family greatly. A lot of us know what happened to Emmett Till, and of course understand what this week meant to him. I just wanted to take a few moments to have you consider the horrible scars left on this family by these events that took place in August of 1955. You've been looking at a picture of Simeon sitting in his dad Moses' lap back in the day, and this is Simeon standing at Bobo's grave late in life. Here's a short clip Wheeler did later in life about the angst the family felt.
There's a real problem. I was not interviewed. We didn't talk about it, and we didn't want to talk about it. You know why? Among the blacks is that, why didn't you do something? My people did this, my people. And the whites were saying he got what he deserved. Because the media had told my story, told the Till story with so many different slants.
As we come back to the site where Moses Wright's house once stood, I really want to encourage you to do some research and reading of your own. Knowledge is really cheap. I found the book Simeon's Story, an eyewitness account of the kidnapping of Emmett Till, on eBay for a mere $5. And take just a minute to consider the impact that these horrible events had on this family, especially this group of young boys who just wanted to enjoy the hot August Mississippi sun with their family. Thank you.